7th day of May, 2024. I'm in your face right away. I'm Dana Durnford. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. Don't forget to click around while you're around. Our new images from Fukushima Daiichi press tour. So this is the ALP system in 2013, and the press club was invited in to take pictures. But if you go read this story, August the 9th, 2014, they were hoping before the end of 2014, which is 3.5 years later already, but they're hoping in the next few months they would have the ALP system up and running. That's important because, remember, the buildings are actually gone. They were destroyed right away. Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing good tonight. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana Durnford, and you can call in to these live shows at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We're going to go back into the time machine because we had a bunch of headlines we haven't covered. Some we did, but we have a bunch we didn't cover. That are rather important. I'll pop right in here with you in a moment. Here we go. Canadian radiation tests showed the iodine-131 in the rainwater is almost 100 times above the insane U.S. drinking water limits. There is no safe limit. And I think the U.S. drinking water limit was 7,500 atoms or something, which is... Actually, don't quote me, and I can't remember off the top of my head. No, that was tritium, sorry. 3H. So what that meant, though, was that you had all the other isotopes would have been in that same sample. They also have done a study with 20 million atoms of iodine-130, or particles of iodine-131 per liter. There's another study out of Ottawa of 220 million atoms of iodine-129 per liter, which... When you understand how the ratios work, it's so there's 10 times more iodine-132 for every time iodine-131 is created. So wherever you find iodine-131 is going to be 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, and 31 times more iodine-129. That's the ratio of the creation, right? And the list goes on and on: strontium, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium. You can't have anything by itself. It doesn't just, iodine-131 doesn't just show up. But you can find it. So then they can do a mathematical extrapolation for the other isotopes. So Canada, all the insects and the birds in particular were, particularly the insect-eating species. Most of the birds you're seeing now in Canada, United States, are seed eaters. Canada radiation test showed 131 iodines in the rainwater at 100 times. So you're supposed to not drink any more water ever in Canada. We didn't. We kept drinking the water. In fact, Canada released all restrictions on the food from the nuclear wasteland and Japan after 93 days, while 55 countries banned it for a decade in 14 prefectures, not just the Fukushima prefecture. And so every street in Canada, United States, and certainly Japan should look like that right there. Third Fukushima nuke worker dead. Yet you'll hear the mouthpieces, the disgusting parasites out there saying nobody died at Fukushima or from the radiation. These are insane. It's not illegal to tell that lie, by the way. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. No one knows why it's not illegal, but it's not illegal. It's the Congress, the parliaments, the senates, the diets have the authority to make, and they have made over 3,000 chemicals illegal to poison you with. but they don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. This is why they're able to murder you in your hospitals. Massive dead creatures floating in Tokyo Bay near where the radioactive ash is dumped. Well, Tokyo, and the best way to explain Tokyo, just bear with me. Because it's kind of complicated until you look at the evidence, then it's no longer complicated. I got a neat way to do it. Sometimes I can find it. Today's one of those days, I would imagine. It could take a moment. So think of a country, think of all these white bags you're looking at as 1 ton bags of radiation that they picked up. There we go. Something here. The problem is there's so much, right? Here we go. So this is just one of the hundreds of examples we got of the actual numbers in Tokyo. Now, Tokyo is 36 million in metropolitan Tokyo. So when you're talking about 18 million atoms after a rainfall per square meter of cesium, which you're talking about is 137, I would imagine, 134. Typically it's 134, 137. That if they're going to acknowledge anything, they'll acknowledge them. And it just can't be cesium. The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods, by the way, is curium isotopes. So think of it as a vast area, which is saturated with enormous amounts of this stuff. And so every time it rains in Tokyo, where does that wash to? It washes down to the shorelines. But the shorelines weren't excluded from these numbers, by the way, right? But all the litter, like the radioactive leaves, the radioactive pollen, the radioactive bacteria and stuff like this gets washed down, because bacteria and mushrooms, for instance, and bacteria is known to aggregate radiation. So when that ends up pulled up somewhere, these are extraordinary numbers, like the drain sprouts from your roof. You might find these to be actual physical hot spots. Or if you sat there, you might get a lethal dose that will kill you next week or the week after in these radioactive areas, because everything washes down over and over into those concentrated spots, right? So every time it rains in Tokyo, what happens? It washes down to the shoreline. But the thought that they're dumping radioactive ash into Tokyo Bay, don't be surprised by that statement, because that's simply true. This is how and the ash is from the incinerators. Like they had 23, and I covered that last night, or I believe 23, or Sunday night. 23 incinerators they built to burn radiation, just in Fukushima Prefecture. So imagine how insidious the ash that's going to be. All right. Nuclear has to use climate crisis to justify the high cost. Low emissions are reactors' biggest advantage, but it's absurd to suggest there's a low emissions. When you take the reactor out after 14 months and put it in a fuel pool for the rest of your life, it's still splitting atoms. It's the worst emission conceivable, imaginable. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, these invisible snowstorms. So everything's getting a full body X-ray all day long. Florida, is that Florida, boys? EPA. The EPA, they should be shot. Legally, of course, right? Rainwater has highest levels of radioactive material in the United States. 80 times the amount of the iodine-131 allowed in the drinking water. In the rainwater, which means you're supposed to abandon Florida. permanently, because it's not just going to be iodine 131. And when you look at the ratios, then you start to really appreciate the horror. Speaking of horror, Dr. Geraldine Thomas, she's a serial killer, like the nuclear students are going to be in the near future. What did I click on? I wonder. Bear with me. Oh. A little worried there for a second. Hang on here. We got a poll for everybody tonight. Hi, everyone. Should nuclear students / future serial killers have to apologize to Fukushima victims before they graduate? Because these are serial killers. Once they graduate, they're serial killers, right? Now, I have shopping, but I don't think it shows up, does it? Is shopping showing up in your pages? Save the insects, ban nuclear power. That's kind of expensive, that one. Nuclear power disease factories, $20. Fukushima extinction level event. Save the insects, ban nuclear power. Save the children, ban nuclear power. Shock and horror, UN conference of Party 28 promotes nuclear. And the best-selling shirt we got, we're 2 shirts away from selling 300 of the Calm Down Charlie t-shirts. You got no idea how much pleasure that actually gives me all the time. I only make $1 on each of those shirts, by the way. But it's because you have to make some profit or they won't let you post it. So I got it for $1. And the t-shirts are like $28 or something. Calm Down Charlie's. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But they never show up that I can see anyway. And you might see them. I don't know if you see them or not, but I don't see them. And looks like I got censored off of BitChute. Started yesterday. Instead of getting 200 or 300 views on each of the little videos, I get 10 or 15. Ain't that interesting? So Geraldine Thomas, let's get back to Geraldine Thomas, who we've covered so many times, everybody's probably puking right now. A senior academic specializing in cancer research. She's a serial killer on a whole different level, and she only radiates children. She's also a professor and radiates you by teaching the students to be monsters. To end the public's exaggerated perception that nuclear radiation is harmful to human health. But yet she uses radiation to murder children in a hospital. So we also hear people saying, let's sit in a nice hot spa with lots of nice radium. I don't know. I've never heard that expression. Let's sit in a nice hot spa with lots of nice radon. Have anybody actually ever heard that? I do believe it's illegal to do that, right? But they know that the radon causes lung cancer. Why do we believe natural radiation is fine and beneficial, but anything that we make is not? Well, because it's not. That's what we have terrorist laws. Shithead. It's the same reason why she can't take the radiation she murders the children with and throw it in a local landfill. Because it's dangerous. She said, I didn't know about the radiation from the wind and solar, but I do now. She said, look, what are you talking about? There is no radiation from wind and solar, unless you're talking about anthropogenic man-made wind that was, or fallout in the wind. She said, I didn't know about the radiation from wind and solar. This is a real-life monster, this person. I'm going to play a couple of clips. Get your barf bags out. We need to get our message out there as effectively as the anti-nuclear brigade do. The actual anti-nuclear brigade is not very effective at all. They don't even know why nuclear waste is bad. Nuclear waste is bad because it's still splitting atoms. It's like it's a perpetual disease factory for billions of years. And this was researched and written by the World Nuclear News, which is the World Nuclear Association, which is a lobbying group for the nuclear industry. And you'll never see their name on a story, whoever authored the story. But let me introduce you to the madness that is Geraldine Thomas. And put my headphones on. So I know it looks like I got big ears, but I don't. It's headphones. So don't go torment me.
In the UK, we've always prided ourselves on academia being very independent of government. And if government ministers think we're going to say what they want us to say, they have another think coming. We don't act like that at all.
Well, that's reassuring. Not really, though.
Whereas, if you look at it logically, we're all exposed to radiation. I went to the Fukushima power station last time I was over in October. I got more of a dose coming on the plane than I did while I was visiting the power station.
They're completely different. You can't conflate them. They have nothing to do with each other. It's one of the most egregious lies you hear all the time.
So, for example, coming here, I would have got a dose of 0.07 millisieverts on the flight. And I actually went round Fukushima Daiichi on Wednesday, and the dose that I had going around the site, so very close to where the reactors are, it was 0.01 and probably lower, but that's the lowest it could actually read. So I got more of a dose flying here, and we'll get a dose tomorrow when I fly home, than I would have done from being in Fukushima.
She's saying she right by the reactors, and the dose was so small it didn't even register in the Geiger counter. And that the airplane was much worse. That's two different times, right?
We seem to have lost our ability to look at facts when it comes to radiation, and we need to find a way of redressing that. Where we get those ideas from, it's interesting to speculate. It's possibly things like, the comics, people being bitten by a radioactive spider and getting special powers, and we've taken more notice of the fiction than we...
People getting bit by spiders getting radioactive powers, which was created by the nuclear industry.
Krishna, freelance writer for Yuka Fuji, and I'm a generous member of the Scientists for Accurate Radiation Information. I'm pro-nuclear power generation. Restart of the nuclear plants much more beneficial than worrying too much about the fact-finding or the...
So he's saying the restarting of nuclear reactors is much more beneficial than worrying about what happened or fact findings.
My name is Hiroki Fujita, and I'm with the Kokumin Shimbun newspaper, soon to be independent, perhaps. I'm a member of the Scientists for Accurate Radiation Information based in New York. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe America. Mm-hmm.
So this girl right here, you can tell she doesn't like him.
And what I learned from them is that we have a radiophobia. Yeah.
What's Geraldine Thomas?
But up until now, nobody killed
absolutely
by Fukushima radiation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot of people die because they're,
You hear Geraldine Thomas saying absolutely.
Forcibly removed. Mm-hmm. And they were not, didn't have access to proper medication or treatment, or maybe their lifespan was shortened because of the stress.
Yeah.
So it's talking about the evacuees, where there's a couple of thousand of them died right away. That was from the radioactive plume.
Or, circumstances.
But they're saying that nobody's ever got hurt, and they died from stress.
Yeah.
So my question is that with the radiation dose so low, microsievert, not even millisievert, right? We shouldn't worry about radiation. And if we didn't, 4 years ago, worry too much about radiation, maybe we didn't have a ghost town that we have now in a Fukushima surrounding area. Yeah. We didn't have many people, over several thousand. In 3 months, over 2,000 people killed. Yeah. Not because of radiation, because... Okay.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, and I think you can understand, and I think it was appropriate in the first hours after the accident started to happen to remove the people from that area.
The first hour? Holy smokes, woman. Or creature, I should say. You know, they're also burning the debris from the incinerators. We covered that on Sunday night. But I forgot to show you this model of where the huge numbers from burning it around the prefectures, not just the incinerators that they built specifically for burning radiation, how it re-liberates it all and radiates the country again. Festival held at the new soccer training ground at J Village in Fukushima. J Village is where the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, would rally to be taken into the death camps at Fukushima. Local children roll a big ball together at a sports field to mark the opening of a doomed training field at J Village in the town of Naraha, which is 100% nuclear wasteland. Naraha is a nuclear wasteland. So they bring children there because the Japanese believe that without the children, the community people won't move back there. They want people to move back there so they don't have to pay them money and so nuclear doesn't get a black eye and a fat lip. And nuclear should lose its head every time somebody sees it. So bringing the children back to a nuclear wasteland to prop up the nuclear industry, the nuclear industry gets an F on the report card for that one, I think. Nara Town, Fukushima Prefecture, Environmental Ministry town officials say if more than 100,000 becquerels of radioactive cesium are found per kilogram of debris, it will be transferred to a medium storage facility to be built by the state. But if burnable debris contains 100,000 becquerels of radioactive cesium or less, it may be disposed of at a temporary incinerator to be built within the prefectures. Now, we covered that story. Such a disconnect. This industry is the only industry that I see where evil is the only way. If you're evil, that's the only way you're going to get a job. And that's the only way you can talk to media or cameras. You got to be evil. You got to come out and say that it's like a banana. It's completely harmless. It's the most lethal thing in human history. I mean, just a single atom can cause you serious illnesses 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. But we're way past that with the weapons testing alone. And so Fukushima was a pulse event that covered the entire planet. So when you see these one-ton bags, that's because there's 150,000 sites like that in Japan. And we only have pictures of 1,000 at best. And so I got artificial intelligence cooking me up all of these pictures. So we got to cook up 149,000 pictures over the next couple of years. So far, I've only got 2,000. Because we can't imagine what it really looks like. There was 30 million one-ton bags picked up, which is 5 rows of one-ton trucks wrapped around the entire planet. With one of these bags in the back of each one-ton truck. See, nuclear is low carbon, even low carbon than solar. Again, something that makes 30 million bags of waste that you got to store for millions of years is not low carbon. And carbon, by the way, without carbon, we're like the moon. You can't have plants, you can't have trees, you can't have insects, birds, mammals, animals, babies, humans, nothing. You can't have puppies, kitties. You can't have nothing without carbon. Carbon, you can't have the houses, you can't have anything. Everything on this planet is carbon-based. The more carbon, so coal, gas, and oil emissions, they create carbon. And it doesn't travel very far. It's carbon. It's very heavy, very big, very large particles. And it contributes to the ecosystem. It's not bad for the ecosystem, obviously. It's a cycle of life, really. It's been going on for millions of years before we got here. You know, carbon, gas has always come out of the earth after eons and burnt, and we've had coal mines that have been burning for as long as we can remember, in some parts of the world. We had from lightning strikes. We have oil. All of this material is caused by matter. It's just recycled. And we're already acclimated to all of it through genetic superior selection. But nuclear is anthropogenic. It's man-made, and it's not created by the solar system like carbon or the rest of the elements on our planet. Like the elements we're created are got nothing to do with stuff that comes out of a nuclear reactor, and that nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against the stuff that comes out of a nuclear reactor, which means it's lethal everything with replicating cells, no matter how. So you're talking about all the way from the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestration chain, all the way up. Some pictures and videos for everybody at the end of the show tonight, so make sure you hang around after the show's over. Radiation near Tokyo spiked to 100 million times normal, but like Krishna and Geraldine Thomas from Imperial College London, United Kingdom, are saying there was no adverse side effects whatsoever. And that it's good for you, that we're all exposed. Like the radiation that they conflate it, so they want you to believe that the sun is equal to nuclear meltdowns. They want you to believe bananas are equal to the emissions from a nuclear meltdown. They want you to believe potato chips are equal to the emissions from a nuclear meltdown. These are insane monsters. These are actual real-life monsters, like nuclear students ultimately become nuclear monsters. Radiation near Tokyo spiked to 100 million times normal. There is no normal. Intensive contamination in Tokyo area, extreme high levels. And some numbers were trillions of glass spear hot particles per kilogram. Information about radioactive contamination is hidden from the public. Well, they refused to release the SPEEDY data. And the SPEEDY data was, they created somewhere around 5,500 models. It's a modeling software. And so they input volumes, and then it turns out into particulates, and they put in the wind patterns and everything else, and it'll show you where the wind is going to blow all this stuff. And they gave it to the American military, but they didn't give it to the citizens who paid for it. And they paid the people to run it. They gave them the education, the monetary, they gave them the authority, they gave them their pensions and everything else. Generations of when you finally had an accident, they cut everybody's throat. It's the strangest story imaginable. Every facet of nuclear is the biggest betrayal you'll come across. And there's 9,000 or something facets to nuclear that we've covered over the years. Japan nuclear operator tampered with the video images of the fire to hide the scale of the disaster. They're talking about reactor 4. You can't talk about nuclear without talking about evil. There's no other way to describe it. Well, there is other ways, I guess, but I can't say it on YouTube. But evil kind of sums up the enormity of what we're talking about. I'm going to show it to you any second, maybe. Why is it, whenever I want a picture that I use all the time, it's the hardest picture to find, but you got to have it poked everywhere. Okay, let me do it the hard way. This is torture. Hang on, I'll get there. My big problem is I see so many other things. I want to stop and grab them. But let me make the point. Somewhere in the next 50 minutes. There we go. That was chaos. So, tamper with a video image of the fire to hide the scale of the disaster. They were talking about the building to your left. Now, I'm going to play this clip. They're going to tell you that they're in the fuel pool, which is a 190 feet tall building, 19-story, 65-meter building, to your left, where now there's nothing left. Whatever's there should have been razed all the way to the ground. But it was left there so they can put a cover over it that doesn't physically touch it, and then they pretend that they're actually in the building.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest X-ray.
1,500.
The buildings are... The fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. They can't be at the fuel pool. Now, America has 71 identical reactors. They could have went to any of them and shot that video. Or it could be just green screen, but it looks like they're actually in the buildings. So it's not Japan, that's for sure. So there's Reactor 4 to your right. Now, officially, that never happened. There's Reactor 3, which is the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And officially, that never happened. The International Atomic Energy Agency says nothing got out of the buildings as of July the 13th, 2023. And that the release has only started last year on August the 24th. But it was only tritium, that nothing got out of these buildings. So how do you have a conversation when an industry is that evil? And is that hideous? And is that has that much contempt for you? Where it just couldn't care less. I mean, these pictures is from their website, from TEPCO's website, and now they're saying that that never happened, it doesn't exist, that everything is okay. Complete information control. Japan's newspapers received much frightening info that's covered up. Some evacuees died from acute symptoms, yet not reported. Well, there's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary. There's thyroid, there's adrenaline, there's Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. And it's interesting because I got 18 people, 15 likes on a show that's been going steady for 13 years. CC-137 levels, and you'll see that a lot, and whenever you see that, then that you just caught them being scumbags. And Osaka is 350 miles southwest of Fukushima. And the first ever detection of CC-134 made in 2011. I doubt that. These are absurd numbers, 100 times. There is no normal levels, what they call weapons testing left over, right? This is an industry that should never, ever, ever, ever got out of the 50s. And if you're not familiar with the subject, you got to go back a dozen videos of the live streams, right? And you'll see Chernobyl anniversary 2024, and watch that. And there's around 400 academic studies, and so they know all about radioactive fallout. There is no illusions whatsoever. They're well aware. There is no way they can. If we're in a court case and they were saying they don't know much about the harmful effects of nuclear, they're going to lose. If someone like me is there, because we have the academic studies that clearly show they studied nuclear elements more than the solar system's elements, the stardust, the stuff that we're made of. Japan official: Fukushima nearly as serious as being attacked by nuclear weapons. Well, in fact, we've known all citizens might have left Tokyo. If facts were known, all citizens might have left Tokyo. Well, they should not only have left, they should have been evacuated from Tokyo. I showed you some of those numbers earlier, which quantifies evacuation. 185, not 1,850, but or 18,500 or 180,000. But 185 is an evacuation zone at any nuclear site pre-Fukushima. Some places were 150 counts per minute was an evacuation zone. Now 29 million counts per minute is, who cares? Well, you should. Japan professor, use of nuclear energy is a crime against humanity. Well said. Touche. We have to think of this equally as the use of nuclear weapons. What's the date on that? Oh, they must be close together. That's January the 15th, 2012. And that's September the 16th, 2012. So very far apart, right? Japan newborns were treated like guinea pigs for study of nuclear weapons and radiation. The stillborn babies are secretly shipped. Oh, we got James calling in. Oh, good day, James. How are you, sir?
Hello, Mr. Dana. I'm like perplexed how the Calm Down Charlie t-shirt's done so well. Like, who's buying all this stuff, I wondered. I mean, I bought a few because I just know they're going to be collector items in the future, I'm sure.
I crack up every time I see it, eh? Blows me away. So we only got 18 people on our show, so I got no idea who the hell is buying all the t-shirts.
Yeah, I bet there's a room in Livermore Labs somewhere that's full of these t-shirts, like a drinking club. It's like where they, try to come back to reality about things, or like at least, there's someone out there that realizes how screwed up this is.
Somebody's paying
I
attention.
don't think that makes sense. But no, I wanted to call in because I wanted to kind of give an idea of my progress that I'm making with building this GPT that's like critical to the nuclear industry.
Awesome.
It's funny as hell. It's like, what I've discovered is you got to get past the base narrative with everything. So the base narrative that it's stuck on is that carbon emissions are the problem for climate change. It just understands that. It doesn't know why, but I found that if you explain details to it, the more deeper you go, the more it understands. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, so
it starts rejecting carbon.
Yeah, so you just straight up ask it, like you did in the video of that congressman or whoever who was asking those panelists, scientists, like, what's the percentage of carbon CO2 in the atmosphere? No, like, I don't know, 9%, 20, I'll take 21, and it's 0.04?
0.04. Yeah, 0.04 of a percent.
So I asked AI that, and it gets the question right. It's like, yeah, it's not 0.04. I'm like, and it's like 400 parts per million it comes up with. And I further ask it, like, well, what's the needed threshold for plant life to thrive? Like, what's the CO2 in the atmosphere need to be? And it's like, well, it's be as low as 200. But, and it kind of goes into this spiral. And it's like, all right, well, what exactly... What's the problem here? If the carbon sinks of the ocean and the forest, then why isn't anybody looking at the fact that maybe the carbon sinks are broken? After all, Fukushima's happening. It breaks the column. That first 5 feet of the ocean, the column chain, is where all that phytoplankton lives. All those microorganisms. They've been wiped out. That's the carbon sink. So if the carbon sink's broken, it's not that if everyone were to drive a Tesla, it's going to reverse the process. There's the underlying, and it's like, you're absolutely right. Yep. And it goes.
That's excellent.
Funniest thing in the world.
Yeah, because they say that the AI can be a weapon, right? And so truth is the biggest weapon we got right now.
Right.
I know people ask me, how the hell do I remember everything? It's pretty straightforward. Just don't tell any lies. If you don't tell any lies, then everything is simple. There's no extra equations, right? And so the artificial intelligence, it when it learns the truth, it can only extrapolate from the truth. All of a sudden, then that's quite the weapon, and the industry is terrified of people like yourself.
That's absolutely, that's what's going on, Dana. I think, we need to you're showing it every night with the pictures you show, and I ask AI, I'm like, hey, Dana's got this picture, what do you think of it? And it gives me, oh yeah, that's really thought provoking, thinks they're doing a great job. It's funny.
Thought provoking. Yeah.
But that really is the thing. I mean, because the media is trying to scare everybody about, it's going to take out your job, but this is really the only thing we've got as the everyday people. I mean, and AI understands exactly everything you've been doing. So I just want to keep this momentum going.
Yeah, that's great news. No, and I wondered about was somebody, because you mentioned it recently before, right? But I was always wondering, was anybody taking all this information and plugging it in artificial intelligence and putting a big a big old turd in their punch bowl, so to speak, right? Because these people are, they're not getting away with it. That's why all of us are here. Because we're determined that they're not getting away with it, right?
They can't get away with this. I mean, AI sees clearly that there's no seashells on the beaches anymore on the west coast. Oh, that's because of ocean acidification. Again, if ocean acidification is to be blamed, then what's the cause of that? If the carbon sinks don't exist anymore, which reduce that acidification, then the only thing that could be is these ongoing core meltdowns. And you can't use conjecture and say, oh, the ocean's a big place, it can dilute everything. It's not. You can't.
And when did all of this happen? When did all the shellfish disappear off the beach post Fukushima?
Right.
When did all the whales and birds show up emaciated post Fukushima? When did all the phytoplankton disappear post Fukushima? When did supercell storms start post Fukushima? When did the massive forest fires, the massive flooding, the massive glacier melting? These are all post Fukushima. They all got that one thing in common. They all started post Fukushima. So when artificial intelligence starts understanding it, it starts looking for other stuff now that happened post Fukushima that we don't think about, right?
Right, and it's just like what Kevin Blanchard said. Like, what happened? Was there a meteor that hit the Earth? He goes in there like there was an outliner.
Something happened. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So what did happen? It was Fukushima.
That's
great.
I just wanted to call and bring this up because it's just so fascinating, because it feels like there's a possibility that maybe the world can really understand what's happening, because the world's so confused. I mean, they're like, oh, there's bird flu now, there's this, there's that.
Oh, yeah.
And no one, they don't get it. It's like, well, what do you think the cause of all of this? I mean, let's think about it.
I'm waiting for the headline where scientists think the bird flu killed off the dinosaurs, the trees, the rocks. It's just a matter of time, right? You go to the mechanic and you ask the mechanic what's wrong with your car, and he's going to go, fuck, man, that's the bird flu. Can't you tell? Listen to it.
But the biggest thing, I mean, if you remember years back when the beginning of this and everyone's hectic and distracted, there were stories out there that the meat farms all got COVID.
Yeah.
And they had to kill the meat. And it's like, well, how's that? We find out that they feed the meat ground up whale meat.
Oh, and that's right. And so... So the bird flu at that time was because they were eating a lot of contaminated food that Japan was selling cheap on the side, right? Like they were eating the rice, they were eating grains that were in the nuclear meltdown area. The birds would eat it, and then they would kill the birds before they sold them, right? Because there was just their way of getting rid of it. They had so much. It's hard for people to comprehend. Yeah, that's great stuff, James. Holy crap.
It's crazy. It's great. All right, I didn't want to take much more time.
No, that's great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Love you, brother. Take care. Yeah, you too, man. Okay, bye-bye. That's James Lucid, everybody. As you know, James from the comment section and perpetual supporter of this madness that we're trying to accomplish. And we got, he's working on this artificial intelligence, and he's educating it to think like us. Think realistic, right? And then we're going to start seeing some terrifying stuff, because artificial intelligence is going to go, oh, by the way, you missed this, you missed that, you missed this over here, you missed that over there. It's a frightening. And so he was talking originally about, I'm going to play a video of a testimony in front of the House Transportation Committee on carbon, because there was all this conjectures and opinions on carbon. And so he's asking the experts, the panels who are in charge of making the decisions. And their response, they don't even freaking know. When he asks them, what's the percentage of carbon in the atmosphere, just give me, they don't know. He said, well, give me a wild shot in the dark. And this is unbelievable that these are the people that are in control of your future. And here's their knowledge all summed up in a 2-minute video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists.
In fact, hang on, because I know this video is a little low on the audio. I'm going to have to boost it and restart it. Just bear with me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists. Let me just go right down the line real fast. What percent of our atmosphere is CO2?
In a second, hang on. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists. Let me just go right down the line real fast. What percent of our atmosphere is CO2? Take your best guess. You don't have to be accurate. All down the line.
Repeat that question.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Wild guess. It's okay.
I'll bite 5%.
5?
I'll just follow you then.
We'll go 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5? How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Dreher.
7.
7. Did you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7,
This Price is Right.
8. I'm going to get the high end.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to put you on ice. I ask a lot of people that because all we hear is climate change, CO2, CO2. I heard a couple of you on the panel saying you're looking to change your vehicles to electric, even though we don't have the electric grid. And me as a farmer, I wouldn't be real happy about running out and replacing $300,000, $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment because someone wants it to be electric. The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not a half of a percent. It's 0.04%. And it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying off.
So 4/100 of a percent is 0.04. So let me, because I have an extra way of adjusting the volume, but it's in the control room, right? And I rarely use it. But that video, I got to remaster it so that I don't have to keep doing that, because that's one of the few videos with such a low volume. But the volume is really great. It's really clean. And I'll tell you what, just give me 1 second. I'm going to put that so I can find it and save me a bunch of work the next time. Right up in front of this spot here. And then I'll know the next time, hopefully, tomorrow or tonight, to adjust that volume and put that in the same spot. I might have screwed up now, though. I can't find my spot. It's okay. Oh, there it is. That's right, too. I left it off right there. Stillborn babies were secretly shipped to the United States for research. After Nagasaki, Hiroshima, there was thousands and thousands and thousands of stillborn babies from Hiroshima and Nagasaki were shipped to Los Alamos National Laboratory and some of the other laboratories. So imagine being, you're a scientist. You tell your children and your parents and your friends, your neighbors, the kids you grew up with and everything else that you're a scientist. You work for Los Alamos National Laboratory. You make a lot of money and you do important work, right? But you don't tell them that they shipped thousands of babies, not counting everybody else they shipped, which was, I can't remember the number, 8,000 adults or something. And then you ashed the babies and sniffed the ashes for radiation. But you're not going to tell your friends and your children and your wife and that story. You're going to go home and tell them a big whopping lie, right? Organ samples and medical records on more than 1,200 babies who were stillborn or died shortly after birth after being carried by mothers who survived the 1945 U.S. atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were sent to the United States for radiation research. 77,000 newborns were studied between 1948 and 1954 from Nagasaki, Hiroshima. 77,000 newborns were shipped to the United States and ashed in the incinerators at Los Alamos National Laboratory. 77,000. So imagine these scientists are going to have kids, they're going to raise kids to go to university. That university is going to be paid for by the taxpayers because they're going to use bursaries from Los Alamos National Laboratory. And those children are going to take over their job and their researches. And so generations down the road, the current generation just hates you. They have this, you're just an insect at best to them. You're not even probably that to them. But you're basically something that is okay to pull the legs off and study. And so are your children. 77,000 newborns were studied. They weren't studied, they were, like, calling that a study is so disconnected. How do you not quit your job, right? How do you say, like, I'm not doing this. I'm going somewhere else. I got to fucking deliver papers. I'm not doing this no more. Newborns were treated in the same way as guinea pigs for the study of the nuclear weapons and radiation. That's why you see these particular pictures I jimmied together. And that the current radiation standard is based upon that. So you're basing the standard upon a weapons, a couple of small nuclear weapons used instead of, like, the inventories of each of the reactor buildings were 6 million pounds, not 15 pounds. But that's their current generation of nuclear scientists. They covet one-ton bags. They all nuclear universities, nuclear students, all have these one-ton bags. And before they go to sleep every night, they pray in front of, oh, I love you, one-ton bag. It's terrifying, isn't it? Professor, Japan radioactive crops are being shipped to cleaner areas and then mixed into the food supply. Like a single atom will make you sick eventually. It's unconscionable because there is no cleaner area, or there's cleaner areas, but it's still nuclear wastelands. And so this nuclear industry clearly worships one-ton bags of radiation. Official police state methods used by the government to promote nuclear power. Police state methods are used by the government to promote nuclear power. Now nuclear one-ton bags is the new god on this planet. 98.6% of the time, air contamination around Fukushima plant is not measured. And TEPCO says it lacks qualified personnel to change the filters. That's 2011, by the way. Just hang on a second. That kind of reminded me of something else. that's pertinent to this. The problem is there's so much. There's so much, right? You can't possibly keep up with it. There's just so much. The air around the site is so radioactive. The whole story is just that's June the 30th, 2011. Here's the story from October the 17th, 2011, that the emissions coming out of the ground were at lethal doses, 4.7 sieverts per hour, which is 20% more than it was in June. And so TEPCO says the air is not measured around the plant. Well, in June, you couldn't be at the plant because this was happening in June. And the only people that would have been there would have been people who didn't know anything, didn't have a formal education of any kind whatsoever, or the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, and the immigrants who don't speak the language, right? There is no nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear alumni, and everything else working there. Because 4.3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So when you're talking about, that was upgraded after that to 6 places around the reactors where the steam coming out of the ground, geysers of it, were at 10 sieverts per hour. And that the whole site disappears in radioactive plumes. I actually got a video, so just hang on, let me just, because you gotta really see the evidence before a lot of people accept it, right? And Dana got lots of evidence. Oh my goodness, have we got evidence? No, I know I can find the screen capture. I already got the screen capture, so let me see if I can find the video right quick. The video stands out on its own, so it's right there. So this video is 40 times the normal speed. I'm going to jump ahead, and you're going to see the emissions now. See the emissions? Like, you have to run away. If you get anywhere, if that plume touches you, you die. Not tomorrow or the next day, but you die, wherever you go. These are inconceivable doses we're talking about. This is 40 times the regular speed. And so everything the steam touches becomes incredibly radioactive forever on top of that. Try putting these equations into your mind and think about the absolute horror that we're talking about on that site. So when you see a story where 96% of the time the air contamination around the plant is not measured, it's 100% of the time, not 96% of the time. Japanese researchers, they remind me of Godzilla. 95% of the worms died, and the survivors grow 10 times the average size when raised on Tokyo soil, which is 240 kilometers away, contaminated with radioactive materials. So Tokyo soil, 95% of the worms die. Every organism in the Fukushima prefecture, the worms' excrement at Fukushima, 60 miles away, was 1.4 million atoms per kilogram. These are unimaginable numbers pre-Fukushima. None of this is conceivable pre-Fukushima, by the way. And disbelief. The Japanese government discontinued radiation monitoring program just weeks after the meltdown and had been operating for 50 years, which was a world record. So they had this established there for 50 years where they would measure radiation in the air. After Fukushima, they shut it down. We discontinued radiation monitoring now, but we've been doing it for more than half a century. And the undertaking already set a world record as the longest of its kind, and the Institute had earned the respect of many countries for that. But when they radiated the entire planet themselves, they decided they didn't want their loved ones to know the truth. Japan Prime Minister feared the country would collapse. Now, they were talking about if reactor 4 fuel pool caught fire, they would have to ban in Tokyo. And that's reactor 4 fuel pool over there. And so what they done was roll out the main media, CBS set Dorn, CBS, BBC for Europe, CNN, which is a worldwide scumbag, and ABC Australia, Cecilia Vega, who's currently in the White House Press Club. She makes $1 million a year being a journalist or being a monster. Oh, that's right, yeah, being a monster. Scientists fear Fukushima radiation is hitting the U.S. to worsen. A lot of people are very concerned. Experts, billions are exposed. And the reactors will continue to pour water into the Pacific for the rest of humanity, for the rest of the human experience, and long past any species experience. It'll still be hemorrhaging from underneath the reactors because a lot of it's got China syndrome. Reactors will continue to pour water into the Pacific for the rest of the time. And I asked for a picture of the rest of the time. That's what it cooked up for me. Single Tokyo ward had 13 schools with radiation levels above safety standards. Tokyo. A single area in Tokyo with 36 million people in metropolitan Tokyo. But a single ward, I don't know how many wards they got, there are probably 50, had 13 schools with radiation levels above the safety standards. So not only should you abandon the schools, you should abandon that ward, right? Those communities. Permanently. Researchers, radioactivity is 6.15 million atoms a square meter, which think of your coffee table or your dinner table, rather. Detected where a kid stands up and waits for the school bus, you know. Detected 60 kilometers from the meltdown. 6.15 million atoms. Now, they're only talking about cesium-137, by the way. So you want to multiply that by 600 to get the real number. Local government, 276,000 atoms per kilogram of radioactive cesium. For every cesium, there's 100 strontium-90 created after the first 1,000 days. Near Tokyo, almost 18 million atoms a kilogram, or a square meter. 18 million. So 185 is an evacuation zone around almost all nuclear power plants pre-Fukushima. So if you take 185 away from 18 million, will you be able to see the difference? I would imagine. So Tokyo should be abandoned, obviously. So should Canada, and so should the United States. Soil samples 30 centimeters deep, but hey, wait on, they're only removing the top 2 centimeters, not 30 centimeters. The 30 million one-ton bags are the top 2 centimeters of soil they scraped up where they want people to move back into the nuclear wasteland, which was basically at best 3% of Fukushima habitable lands. Nothing's habitable by rights. So at 30 centimeters deep, there was 124,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137, 152,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium-1, or vice versa, rather, 134 for the first one, 137 for the second one. And at ground level, it was 70,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium-134 and 85,000 of cesium-137. Like when you total 155,000 atoms a kilogram, you're only talking about cesium. Somehow or another, apparently cesium is the only atom now that ever existed. And I think the scientists who only acknowledge cesium, there's a couple of reasons for it. They can't get money to do any studies on typical other isotopes. It's much easier to get the money to do the one on cesium because cesium is the propaganda. It's a real isotope, It pulses energy 600 feet, for goodness sakes. So the whole surface of the Earth is pulsing energy 600 feet. So everything in the canopies and in the forest and everything is also going to be getting full body X-rays. Everything on the ground is getting full body X-rays. And the kids are the closest to the ground too, right? Remember that. And the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals, where do they live? The majority is on the ground, right? This is why you don't have to clean bugs off your windshield anymore. Official admits decontamination only for reducing external exposures to radiation. So the 30 million one-ton bags they picked up were for the lower external doses. This is evil on a level I've never seen before. And I've never seen anything as evil as this industry. It's a genocide, omnicide. It's an omnicide machine. It kills the biosphere itself. It kills everything. Radiation attacks everything with equal enthusiasm. There's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. It shouldn't be on the planet, see? But this deceptive and deceitful and dishonest and disingenuous, this coward industry, these, they're felons, right? They're sordid felons. They're immortal, nefarious, indefensible, inexcusable. They're terrorists, right? That's what these people actually are. U.S. government was secretly planning to evacuate 90,000 citizens from Japan, and the Fukushima 50 were forbidden to speaking publicly. There have been about 30,000 Fukushima 50s. Terrified of agonizing deaths from radiation poisoning. Anything from the BBC is garbage, folks. They let Jimmy Savile rape over 1,100 children in the basement of the BBC for 4 decades, for goodness sakes. You really think they didn't know what was going on? You really think they weren't participating in that? U.S. government was secretly planning to evacuate 90,000 citizens from Japan. Not anymore. Now they all pray to their one-ton bags. Radiation and food going to be a nationwide problem in the United States, not limited to just one region. Well, that's true for Canada. Anything true for the United States is just as true for Canada. Green tea with over 1,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium in Paris. Pretty soon everybody will be forced to buy a one-ton bag and worship it 3 times a day and before they go to bed. A consignment of radioactive tea from Japan will be detained by custom officials in France. France is evil, man. Like France's La Hague reprocessing facility, which is a crime against humanity on its own, is considered of poisoning the Arctic, along with Sellafield and Donneray in the United Kingdom, reprocessing sites. But think about the fact that La Hague in France, one of its 3 big reprocessing facilities, which are banned in Canada and the United States, but they're now changing the laws because the industry has no resistance. And I'm not able to effectively, because I would go after this industry. You can't imagine what kind of pummeling I would give this industry if I had a big foundation support me. If I had the budget Greenpeace had, nuclear, we'd be building prisons all around the world to put these people. A consignment of radioactive tea from Japan detained by custom officials in France. So France, La Hague, has 500 security guards. 500 security guards. What do you need 500 security guards for? Because they don't want you getting near that place with a Geiger counter or a camera, trust me. And reportedly the tea was en route from the Shikuka prefecture, which is up here. The radioactive tea came from here, and Fukushima is way the frig up there. You know, like Tokyo is right here. This is up by Osaka, for goodness sakes. And 2 sieverts per hour found at the surface of water in the basement. Worker says it's outrageous radiation levels from the melted through fuel. Like in the basement, what are you talking about in the basement? Reactor building basement? You're not getting in a reactor building basement. Right? There's zero possibility you're going to get into the reactor's basement. These are lethal doses just approaching them. You're not getting into basements of these buildings, my goodness. You're not even approaching them. If you do, you're dying that day or that week or that hour even. 3.6 sieverts per hour detected at a rainwater drain pipe. If you sat there for an hour, you don't stand up. You're a dead man. Right? So this industry doesn't have a right to exist. TEPCO confirms the steam came up from underground reactor number 1 outside the building because it's gone China syndrome. I do believe the reactor core is at because the fuel pool detonated, right? Which had around 8 reactor cores. They were gone immediately, and so lost power. When you lose power, the reactors are going to melt down. Now 4.7 sieverts, and they're going to melt down pretty fast too. Within 50 minutes, they're starting to melt. Now 4.7 sieverts per hour, which is 20% more than June. I showed you that earlier. Almost 20% increase over June's measurement of 4 sieverts per hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. And this application is a lethal dose just walking past it. Not hanging out, not twiddling your thumbs, not playing on your smartphone, but just walking past it. Prime Minister contemplated evacuating 30 million from Tokyo, but he didn't do it because of fear of mass panic and chaos. And he also said that eastern Japan might collapse if they abandoned the site, Fukushima site. So they shanghaied all the homeless they could across the entire country. It's despicable. It's a despicable industry. So these are worthless people. I hesitate to call them people. I haven't seen any attributes of human in any of them. So they didn't evacuate it, same as a 3 Mile Island, because they were worried about panic. You know why the Canadian and American nuclear reactors have up to 100 plus sirens around within 10 miles? So you can panic. Because you better panic. That's the right thing to do, is panic and get out of Dodge. But you shouldn't be there in the first place. If you're within 100 miles of a reactor, you're being poisoned. They do sex ratio studies that quantifies that assertion, which shows more males and females being born, right? Which means the entire population is poisoned. And so this way you see incredible increases in heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. And when you think about, whenever the word thyroid, like the numbers we're talking about are insane. So they're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their lives, the children in particular, and the insects and birds and mammals and animals. It's going to be infinitely worse than a child. And a child is 1,000 times worse than an adult because they're developing, so they're producing all these important hormones. But when your thyroid is saturated with so much radiation is doing that, and they are, then that means their skeletons are producing radioactive stem cells. You know, obesity rates doubled in Japan within 1 year of Fukushima, which is an indication of radioactive brain damage after a nuclear accident. And so there's a lot of people out there all of a sudden gain enormous amount of weight and don't understand why they're gaining all that weight. That's your thyroid and your brain damage from radiation. Fukushima Daiichi pushed Japan to the brink of evacuating metropolitan Tokyo's 30 million residents and a national collapse, said the former prime minister. The national government issued a guidance on May the 12th as to how to dispose of the radioactive sludge and slag in Fukushima Prefecture, which is to burn the sludge and store the burned sludge, slag, sewage, in containers. However, there's no such standard for the radioactive sewage treatment outside of Fukushima Prefecture. And so Sunday, 334,000 atoms per kilogram of sewage. And well, if you only, like, you can't just have cesium. You're going to have similar numbers for, you're going to have 100 times strontium-90, which is a bone seeker. Cesium goes into the thyroid, for instance, and sequesters in the muscles and the organs. And strontium sequesters in the bones and the skeleton. Mutates the stem cells on top of that. And so when it does this to insects and birds, they stop reproducing because they reproduce more than we do, right? So it shows up in them much sooner than it would show up in humans because humans don't reproduce as often as insects or birds, right? Sharp rise in iodine-131 levels at 3 Tokyo sewage plants. Sharp rise in sewage, radioactive sewage. But you didn't evacuate because they didn't want you to panic, so it's better just to poison you, make you sick for the rest of your life, make your children sick for the rest of your life, than have you panic, is it? That's the people you got in charge, folks. Sharp rise in iodine-131 levels at 3 Tokyo sewage. And because there's 149,000 pictures missing of the 30 million one-ton bags, I got artificial intelligence cooking up these pictures for me. And they're quite appropriate. That's the sad fucking thing about this, excuse the language. Excuse the Canadian. Radioactive iodine and cesium at 12 sewage treatment plants. So it's not only the sewage plants, right? Which is more than crazy. That's more than insane. But they can't get rid of the sediments from the filtration facilities for the water reclamation. The water filtration creates sediment. 1 ton bags of it too. On a scale that's almost equal to this stuff here. And they can't get rid of it anymore because it's too radioactive. And TEPCO won't take it and get rid of it because they say it belongs to the community that produced it. But it's created because of TEPCO. TEPCO only exists so you don't blame the nuclear industry. You got to have a fall guy, right? You need a boogeyman. So, like, for war, you got North Korea's going to get you. Russia's going to get you. And when it comes to the boogeyman for nuclear, the reality of it is, but when your sewage is so radioactive, when your drinking water is so radioactive, you can't get rid of the sediment. It means all your pipes are radioactive. It means all your laundry is radioactive because you're washing in it, you're showering in it, you're cooking your food, and you're doing your laundry in it. You're cleaning your floors with it, your counters with it, your utensils with it, for Christ's sakes. Excuse the language. And now they're only acknowledging iodine-131. Because if you put in anything else, you're going to go, oh shit, I got a 30 year, that's going to live for 300 years. Or that's going to live for 240,000 years. So the reason they say iodine, because it's got an 8-day half-life, but there's 10 half-lives in iodine. And like if you go deeper down the rabbit hole, you say, oh, well, it lives for 80 days. But it's so much worse than that because for every iodine-131 is 31 times more iodine-129 with a 50 million year half-life. And so you can't say that the sewage is going to have a longevity of 129 million years because people are going to panic appropriately. Tokyo drinking water is unsafe for the infants. If it's unsafe for infants, it's unsafe for everybody. It can't just be unsafe for infants. So the crazy statements, and these are all aggregated from different medias at one site that's now was driven out of business, right? But they were just aggregating all the headlines from the mainstream media. Right? There was dissenting voices originally the first few years. And I show you those headlines regularly, right? And the industry hates me for doing it, by the way. Japan picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and I need 149,000 of these pictures to show you that. Tokyo drinking water is unsafe for infants. The government distributing water bottles. Iodine 131, which means plutonium, uranium, americium, neptunium, strontium, everything else, is in that same samples at multiple locations in Tokyo during November. So the garbage is too radioactive to get rid of. The sewage is too radioactive to get rid of. The sediment from the water filtration, water reclamation facilities, water filtration plants is too radioactive to get rid of. The ash from the incinerators is too radioactive to get rid of. The topsoil is too even 30 centimeters deep is too radioactive to get rid of. The air is too radioactive. In fact, the air in Tokyo was 180 times more radioactive than weapons failure peak. Of just cesium, of course. Because cesium is their holy grail of deception. And so in order to show you 30 million one-ton bags, there was 150,000 sites like this. And so when you're looking at these pictures, that's all I'm trying to do is paint you a picture of the pictures you don't get to see, or I don't get to see either. There's 149,000 pictures we haven't seen yet. So in my infinite wisdom, I decided to cook up my own pictures. Nuclear waste being processed during explosion in France had radioactivities of 17 atoms a kilogram, 30 times less contaminated than what Japan considered safe to eat. In 2011, it was 500 atoms per kilogram. They went from 0.1 atom per kilogram to 500 atoms per kilogram was safe. Of course, there's no such thing. Just because they cooked up a number, that doesn't mean that it's safe. It can never be safe. And what do I mean by that, safe? I got an interesting way to explain that one. And thank goodness that I pay attention over the years, because a lot of this stuff will never show up again, right? So this was a tweet. Japan National Cancer Center stopped releasing the data after 2012. The number of cancer patients rose by 865,000 extra people in 2012, a year after. This is the most insane number imaginable, because not everybody got health care. Not everybody's going to be diagnosed. And cancer is just one of the many illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that is going to manifest from cancer or from radiation. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. You should be doing studies on Alzheimer's and dementia, because you're going to see it, aren't you? And you're going to see crazy cancers you've never seen before, never heard tell of before. You're going to see people just dropping dead, walking down the road in clusters over a week or so. But you're also going to see a massive spike in autism and Down syndrome and Alzheimer's, dementia, and schizophrenia. These are caused by radiation poisoning. And you can trace it all the way back to the weapons testing. Japan government reports Fukushima is worse than the 3/11 quake and a tsunami. Fukushima is an apocalyptic disaster, says a nuclear scientist, that will haunt the future generations. And the world now is an experimental lab with humans as guinea pigs. Remember, she shipped 77,000 stillbirths after Hiroshima. So they love to say that nobody died of radiation from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they shipped 77,000 newborns, corpses, to Los Alamos National Laboratory so the nuclear industry can do human experiments on the corpses. It's such a surreal statement, isn't it? Ability for Unit 4 to withstand another seismic event is rated at 0. At 0. I think it's a little less than 0. It was all gone right away. That's Unit 4 to your left right there. Like, I'm not at this all the time because it's easy. I can tell you that much. I'm not at it because it's fun. I can tell you that much. And I'm not at it all the time because of the enormous audience that I get here every night, because it's not. And I'm not here because I hate the nuclear industry and have a vendetta. I'm here because they hate you and they have a vendetta. That's reactor 4 over there, but what about reactor 3 that doesn't even exist? And this is the original footage. This first couple of weeks or so, 3 weeks in or something. There is nothing left to the building. Fukushima Daiichi worker, I believe that the country will be evacuated. Number 4, fuel pool collapses. Well, look what we got here. It's 2012. So in 2013, that's what the building looked like over there. So the worker didn't know any better. He said there should be hundreds of thousands of people working furiously every day. He warned during his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos that such an action would force the evacuation of 35 million people in Tokyo, close half of Japan, and compromise the nation's sovereignty. And such a humanitarian environmental catastrophe is unimaginable. Well, actually, it's not unimaginable because it happened. And they knew the repercussions of this. Former official in Fukushima, and the World Economic Forum, by the way, are despicable scumbags. They're despicable monsters. Klaus Schwab is a despicable, disgusting, parasitic monster. Former official in Fukushima, this is a disaster of all the humanitarian, so they were cooking up a cover story back then, right? The entire world is on an international level. Well, it's a catastrophe because the entire planet was blanketed with radioactive fallout. And we got endless models of this stuff. And the models are based on puny numbers compared to the real number. I mean, reactor 3, that inventory is not in that model. Fukushima plume model showed 1 million atoms a kilogram. This was the xenon-133. It burns a hole through your lung. It gets in your bones. Over the west coast after reactor 1, this is a per square meter underground that landed. This is landed on the ground numbers we're talking about. TV, private emails reveal the highest levels of government worried about the health impact in the United States. And the nuclear industry tried to bury the truth while UC Berkeley experts told the public there is no plume. Yeah, UC Berkeley was despicable, man. Like Kyle Vetter in particular, they're just despicable. But UC Berkeley in general, the nuclear industry there is disgusting. Their betrayal is just unbelievable. Absolutely no correlation with nuclear disasters, says UC Berkeley professor. That's Kyle Vetter again. He compares eating bananas to drinking water from the Fukushima nuclear plant itself. And so someone like that should be grabbed by the back of the head, hogtied, taken to Fukushima, stripped and put on old raggedy clothes, and put out on a street corner so the Yakuza can snatch him up and take him to Fukushima. It's hard to comprehend that kind of evil for me. And this is Kyle Vetter again. A very clear and present danger. No push to dump radioactive Fukushima water in the Pacific. Or boil it in a large kettle and release the steam, radioactive steam, into the atmosphere for years. Or do both, said UC Berkeley professor Kyle Vetter. Like, evil just comes so natural to the pro-nuclear community, particularly a nuclear professor. They seem to be the most hateful fucking, excuse the language, the most hateful creatures in human history. Professor, it's really a dead zone in the areas of Fukushima. Huge impact. There are no butterflies, no birds. Many dramatically fewer species. Why does it matter to you in the United States and Canada? The reason is it's coming. It's coming. Comparison with X-rays and CAT scans are meaningless. Inhaling a particle, and think we had 20 million particles of iodine-131 after Fukushima. So inhaling a single particle increases the radiation exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. So the particles are much worse than the atom. The particles created by because you got 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, the meltdown, right? So it's consuming steel and rebar and cement and rocks and water and dirt and everything around it. And that is atomized in aerosol into particulates / particles, and then it's ionized and radiated. And so it's not just the inventories, it's the entire site is consuming at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. A Japan official says delay in raising Fukushima to a level 7 was because we could have triggered a panic reaction. But that's what a level 7 is. It's a panic. You're supposed to panic. How are you supposed to get out of the way if you don't panic? No, the panic they were worried about is what people would turn on the nuclear industry. It was totally... The house was burning down, and they didn't want anybody in the doorway when they ran for it. So they let everybody else die so they can get out the door first. That's what they done to us. That was their thinking. You know, and there's a street in Fukushima City, a shopping street in one of the districts there. That's supposed to be abandoned, by the way. In 2011, 7 people died on a single shopping street just walking down the street. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. 7 people dropped dead on a single street. Do you have a street in your community? Well, you might have now after Fukushima. Cover up a massive explosion at Fukushima Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. Each reactor, like I'm not going to use number 3 reactor as a different number, but it should be because reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor, which was weapons grade plutonium. So it was the inventory was huge. But each reactor at 1% would have around 62,000 pounds of plutonium because they have 6 million pounds in each building, right? Around 9 reactor cores, 8 at the top of it in the fuel pools. Legacy reactor cores that are still splitting atoms were, not anymore, obviously, they're atomized in aerosol into the environment. And so that works out to about 240,000 pounds of plutonium. And pre-Fukushima it was said 2 kilograms of plutonium released into the environment is enough to poison all the species on the planet. So what the frig is 240,000 pounds going to do, I wonder? Entire nuclear core injected into the environment. The entire nuclear core. And so reactor 3 was the one they're talking about there. And in the video, and I show quite a lot, but not tonight, you can actually see the reactor core and the fuel pools falling back down to Earth. Once the fuel is exposed to air, it catches fire. Burns at around 1800 degrees, and then it lights up the plutonium uranium pellets inside the cladding, the zirconium cladding. Because the zirconium cladding on the fuel rods, and then you stuff pellets inside of it. The zirconium cladding is the same zirconium with a Z, that you used to use in the old camera flashes. And so you had this little hammer, and it would break the glass, and then when the air rushed in, the zirconium would catch fire, right? And that would cause, and then it would have a big reflector behind it, and it would, you get this, and then it would tear that off and stick another flash with a glass on it for the next picture. And so anybody that was in those areas would have got severe cancers in the 50s, 60s from those flashes. Or 40s and 50s, was it? I can't remember. Cover-up of a massive explosion at Fukushima Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. Well, that's the Reactor 3. There's the plume. Like the reactor building is beyond where my thumb is to. That little spot, no higher than my thumb is right now. So the reactor core, the fuel pool is a couple of kilometers straight up in the air. The plumes covered the planet in just 26 days in that particular model. But we have many models, government models, showing it much quicker than that. And it seems the blast wasn't from the hydrogen. Like if you use uranium, you can use uranium with a conventional explosive. You'll make, if you add 6, 7, 8 grams to a couple of kilograms of TNT, you'll increase the explosive power by magnitudes of order of magnitudes, dozens of times more powerful. That's how they do the fracking, by the way, because you have these little thin tubes, right? And so they've always done it. They've added uranium into the fracking. It's disgusting. They're disgusting, eh? So it would be like Chernobyl on steroids if the spent fuel catches fire, said the nuclear engineer who worked at the identical plants, that each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. So, just over 6 million pounds. And so now currently they're saying that the fuel pools, which are empty, but they're saying that they didn't melt, have around 500 assemblies. And they've been chipping away the numbers. We've been reporting on this for the last 13 years, right? They've been chipping away at the numbers for a long time. And we've called them out on it, but they don't care. A lawyer is not going to, doesn't care that someone's calling him a lawyer. Radiation experts, North America received quite a large fallout. Incredible increases in cancer, leukemia, genetic diseases. Not just in Japan, but in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly North America, Canada, United States. UN agency. Reactor 3 exploded a second time 24 hours later. Then the wind and the rain brought high levels of radiation over Tokyo, Sendai, Nagano. Nagano is brutal radiation. That's over by Ishikawa Prefecture, the Noto Prefecture, right? Not the Noto Peninsula, the Ishikawa Prefecture, which is on the other side, where they had a major earthquake in January the 1st, where a 3,000-year fault line erupted. Spectacular, to say the least. So Reactor 3 exploded a second time 24 hours later, and a week later after that too, by the way. Then wind and rain brought the high levels of radiation over Tokyo, Sendai, but it didn't stop there. Here's France's model of the radioactive fallout, by the way. This model really does a great job of it. This model is based on 31 days. This is the French government, by the way. And the model is based on 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air, cesium-137. Or this is a 15-day radioactive fallout. That one's a 15-day from France. They updated that to this one, which is a 30-day radioactive fallout model. And I put in fallout so you can kind of appreciate it. Now it's covering all of North America, now all of Canada, now the Atlantic, now Europe, now the entire planet. Day 20. We're at day 20 now. The whole planet is covered in 20 days. That model actually goes on for 30 days. So any nuclear accident, see, gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes like that. They don't travel very far at all, just 50 miles on heavy wind maybe. Only nuclear makes plumes like this. And this is a plume covering the entire planet. Now, just because the model stopped, the radiation is never going to go away. This is symmetrical from the ocean floor to the upper tropospheres and higher. And it's a visible plume that you can't perceive. You can't smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it. You can't perceive it. And it's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second, which most people still can't seem to wrap their minds around that statement. And so you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas in these plumes. And they don't mingle with each other. They hit each other and they reflect. It's known as a break-in effect. The Germans call it a Bremsenlung effect. But that's who discovered it was a German. And so when they hit each other almost at the speed of light, they change direction. So imagine two objects traveling almost at the speed of light, hitting each other, and then changing direction. Because I can't imagine it, so I'm pretty sure the average person can. But what it does is it creates another special effect. So you got gammas, alphas, neutrons, betas, and the Bremsenlung, which is known as we call it an X-ray. And so all the species and children and everybody else is getting full body X-rays. And this is not something we can turn our back on. This is never going to go away. We got to deal with it. Now that we discovered it, now, like, there's no good going to the nuclear community and looking for them to acknowledge that the fuel pools are splitting atoms. They're just going to say nuclear waste is toxic. They're not going to tell you that it's splitting atoms. So like South Bruce or Inglis here in Ontario, Canada, that they're setting up for a nuclear waste repository. The locals have no concept that the fuel they're bringing there is vented, because you can't, if you contain it and you bring it there, you can't open the containment, because if you introduce oxygen, it's going to detonate, because that's how volatile this stuff actually is. So everything is vented. Which also means everything is splitting atoms. And they're going to have material sitting there, splitting atoms in their communities. That's the worst case scenario, because you can't perceive it. You can't smell it. You can't feel it or taste it or hear it or touch it or pick it up. You can't throw rocks at it and chase it away. TEPCO concealed radiation data before explosion at the number 3 reactor. Workers not informed at extremely high levels. TEPCO shouldn't exist. TEPCO, by the way, was nationalized by the Japanese government immediately because it was on the stock market and it went broke right away, right? And the bulk of the footage, and we've only seen just this one footage of the explosion from 30 miles away. From a very, very good camera, mind you, but still, it's very grainy, right? But they would have had cameras there. Once the reactors went into oh shit mode, then the industry would have mounted cameras all over the place, so they can record it and study it, like the 77,000 infants that they took from Hiroshima and brought to the United States to see how they died of radiation, right? TEPCO managing director says evacuate the workers from the site after number 3 exploded. Bear with me here. Okay, so that's the show. I got some videos from the day I'm going to play for you. And just reserve your judgment until the end of the videos, please. Because I know people will jump on it before they see the whole story. So don't worry about it. It worked out okay. So these are videos from the day I'm working on the trailer. And in my infinite wisdom, I decided I didn't want to spend the extra $160 on the leaf springs, and I was going to salvage the old ones, and I did. And you'll see that at the end of this. And let's play the craziness that today is. So I was trying to salvage one of those. So I grind it and pound it, and I try to rethread that. I think I got that other one released, because I'm missing one of those U's, and I've used an impact wrench on all the nuts. I can't get them removed, not a single one. In fact, most of them just grind because they're deteriorated with rust. I'm going to see if I can rethread that one. Once I get the other piece off. Looks like it's about to let go, right? So it's just taken off. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to get another one off, but you can see what the tapping die is doing. It's taking off that layer here, right? I'm missing one from my kit. I'm gonna have to go back into the city. If I can get a bolt off, then I can probably rethread it with a bolt, right? As you can see, the bolts don't want to come off. That's the 2 bolts. What's left of them from that one. And so I think what I'll do is I'll gouge around it, around the base of it. It's the same thing over here. They're fused. I don't know what to say. It's a little bit disappointing because I'm being held up because I don't have another one of these are missing. I still got to get the springs off and clean them up. All right. Just a little bit more grinding. A bit more grinding. I should be able to get that piece off. And then clean that up and see what it looks like, I suppose. Yes, so that's the first one cleaned up. Big difference. Came out pretty good. I got the sleeves, the inserts for the ends. So that's okay. And I got the other one off. This took hours, by the way. And that's the comparison. Now I'm going to clean up that one. I got to replace that piece right there. It's pretty rough, I know, but that'll work. And so I got both cleaned up and the first coat of paint on them. I'm pretty happy with that. I got no issues with that. That's fantastic. That was worth it. Yeah, it took forever to do it today. It was a miserable experience, by the way. But it was worth it. I was going to run into the city because it was supposed to be fairly warm today. And I was going to bring back, again, the box with the supports for the axle, right? So the only thing hanging me up right now, because I got that done, I got the inserts for the ends, the sleeves, I got the bolts, I got the hangers, I got the axles, I got everything. If I can't make it to the city tomorrow, I'm going to weld on the springers onto the side of the trailer. And I can't use the U-joint hangers or the clamps for the axle and the springs, because I got to bring it back to the city to exchange it to get the extra one. So I was going to run in on the bike because the bike's a lot quicker, a lot cheaper too, right? And there's only one thing I got to pick up. If I'm going to go in there, I wouldn't mind picking up another one of those grinders, because they're on sale for $30 again. And they're not really good ones, but they're fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I got so much work, I got so much equipment, right, that changing out is just too much work for me. But I'm really happy to get to that stage. And so I know they're going to work now for sure. And I can I can jerry rig something to bind the one that you're seeing that was in bad shape. That one there. Okay, it's in terrible shape. I know what you mean, but like when you're trying to clean this up, you got to hit it with the grinder, then you got to hit it with the wire wheel, and so that's 15-20 minutes each time, and then you got to hit it with a flap disc on top of that to try to get the rest of it off, and then you put your paint on it, and it looks great. I thought it looks great compared to what it looks like when I started. So I'm pretty happy with that. And later the year, right, when I get a break, and that stuff is on sale, I'll pick up new leaf springs and I'll stick them on. But that'll get us rolling, right? So that's all that really matters, isn't it? Alrighty, so let's close the poll down before we call it a night. Should nuclear students and future serial killers have to apologize to Fukushima victims before they graduate? I think that should be a rule for all universities, nuclear students. You should have to go there and tell the cancer victims, the children dying of cancer, that they're sorry. And they'll try to do better. They'll try to come up with a nuclear technology that kills them before the cancer shows up. How about that? Because nuclear students are going to be your monsters. Yeah. Good night, everybody. Oh, Lucid, James Lucid. I guess I'm heading to town. You're awesome, man. Bless your heart, my friend. I hope other people will donate to it, because this is getting ridiculous, okay? This is craziness. And I'm not giving up, and I'm not going away. Anybody knows me, and I've been around forever. I don't know how to give up. But it's not fair that I gotta work my bones raw. My hands are busted up. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. That definitely put me in a better mood tonight. Thank you, James. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. Let that song play out for you. Have a great night. Take care, folks.
If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb. Just leave it to the general, for he really has the nerve to give those no good communists just what they deserve. There'll be fire, dust, and metal flying all around, and radioactivity will burn their playhouse down. If there's any commies left, they'll be all on the run. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb.
Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. Have a great night. See everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.